Madeleine Dean doesn't ease into this hearing, she detonates it. Before Kash Patel can even settle in, she lays out a chilling pattern. Judges arrested, citizens disappeared, federal power twisted into a weapon. And then she asks the one question he cannot spin. When should she expect the FBI at her door?
Thank you, Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Meng, Chairman Cole, Ranking Member DeLauro. And thank you, Mr. Patel, for your testimony and for being here today. I've been looking at the President's 120-word FBI budget request, the so-called skinny, I'll call it Ozempic request, that states that, quote, the undoing of the weaponization of the FBI is one of the administration's top priorities. The weaponization of the FBI is something that deeply concerns me. It should concern all of us. And yet, since taking office, President Trump has been on a revenge tour. He has targeted individuals, universities, law firms, with executive orders to cut them out or to make them come under his will. He has used ICE to disappear U.S. citizens without due process, and he's fully ignored a unanimous Supreme Court order, and then over the weekend wasn't sure if he was obligated to uphold the Constitution of the United States. In your book, your recent book, Government Gangsters, you include an appendix with a list of names that people have referred to as an enemies list. Now, I know you will claim it's just an appendix, not an enemies list. So let's focus on how the president sees it, on what the president calls it. And you proudly display his quote on the front cover of your book. The president calls this a brilliant roadmap, a blueprint. And I have not even raised your storied children's book, The Plot Against the King. It concerns me how many people from this blueprint have been targeted with executive orders and FBI investigations. The FBI cannot be weaponized, and under your leadership, it has been nothing but a weapon alongside the president to go after the president's perceived opponents, to stifle dissent and free speech. A few weeks ago, as we saw through a social media post that you quickly deleted, the FBI arrested a judge in Wisconsin for correctly asking ICE officials if they had a judicial warrant instead of an administrative warrant, which they did not have. Despite this judge following the law, on the morning of April the 25th, the FBI arrested the judge in an escalation of the weaponization of the FBI under your leadership. Let me be clear. A functioning democracy does not lock up judges. I am gravely concerned about the utter lack of independence of the FBI and its weaponization under your leadership. I am concerned that the president is using this book, your book, as a blueprint, as he has said. It's a blueprint for revenge. And I am concerned that your eagerness, a childlike giddiness to carry out the president's revenge tour, you've shown yourself to be unserious in your statements before you were sworn in and some after. You've shown yourself unfit to lead this important agency. I was an impeachment manager for President Trump's second impeachment. It was a sad, solemn duty. And so I wanted to ask you about that. Mr. Patel, as you and the president continue to weaponize and investigate his perceived enemies, as you follow this blueprint, when can I, a former impeachment manager, expect the FBI at my door?
Ma'am, you want to know who was targeted by a weaponized FBI? Me. You want to know how and why?
Well,
you want to know what I'm doing to fix it?
That. Let me move on.
Well, you should read the
topics.
book because there's no enemies list on that book.
So
there are people that violated their constitutional obligations and their duties to the American people.
That's good.
And they were rightly called out. And you should give that book to every one of your constituents so they can read about it.
I won't be doing that.
That's their loss.
During your Senate confirmation hearings, you repeatedly denied having any involvement as a private citizen in the firing of FBI officials who engaged in the prosecution against January 6 insurrectionists, the violent rioters who beat and killed Capitol police officers, and whom you referred to as political prisoners. Since then, multiple whistleblowers have come forward, and we know that you likely committed perjury. At the same hearing, you claimed you were not familiar with Stu Peters and
It starts the moment Madeleine Dean opens her binder. No hesitation, no warming up. She walks directly into the conflict that every American watching this hearing already feels in their gut. Is the FBI still an independent institution, or has it been turned into a political weapon? Dean doesn't dance around it. She goes straight for Kash Patel's claim, and for President Trump's words, that the so-called weaponization of the FBI is the new administration's top priority. But then she lays out something Patel ain't prepared for: the pattern. The arrests, the pressure campaigns, the ICE operations targeting U.S. citizens without due process, even the president's open dismissal of a unanimous Supreme Court order. She paints a picture not of abstract politics, but of a federal government slowly shedding the constraints that keep it from being abusive. And she doesn't just accuse Patel of enabling that transformation. She tells him he may be the blueprint. She holds up his book, Government Gangsters, and points out exactly what Trump called it: a roadmap. Not a memoir, not commentary, a roadmap for payback, for purging perceived enemies, for using institutions that were built to serve the public as levers to punish whoever the president decides to target next. Patel stiffens immediately because Dean isn't treating this like a typical hearing. She is building a case. She brings up the Wisconsin judge arrested after asking ICE officials for a judicial warrant, the kind of warrant our legal system has required for centuries. Dean's point lands hard. When a judge gets arrested for doing their job correctly, something has broken. Not bent, broken. And if the people running these agencies are using political loyalty as their compass instead of the law, then the entire system becomes unstable. You can hear Patel's frustration building. It's not anger at the accusation, it's anger at the precision. He tries to pivot, tries to make himself the victim, tries to frame the book as a simple list of misconduct. But Dean doesn't take the bait. She brings him back to the words he cannot escape. Trump calls it a blueprint. Then she tightens the screws even further. She brings up his confirmation testimony, the denials, the downplaying, the memory lapses. She brings up the whistleblowers, the contradictions, the appearances on far-right shows he claimed not to recall, including Stu Peters, a man whose rhetoric is well documented and deeply dangerous. And then she asks the kind of question that instantly exposes whether a witness is operating in good faith or simply in self-preservation. Should we be more concerned about your memory or your honesty? Patel snaps, accusing her of lying for political gain, but Dean doesn't flinch. And that's where this moment becomes more than political theater. This is a clash over what the federal government should be, not just who's running it. It's a battle over whether institutions survive when loyalty to one man becomes more important than loyalty to the Constitution. And then comes the quietest, sharpest strike of the entire exchange. She asks him the question he least wants to answer. If he's following the president's revenge blueprint, when should she, a former impeachment manager, expect the FBI at her door? This is where the entire conversation crystallizes. She is not asking out of fear. She is asking to demonstrate the absurdity and the danger of a federal agency whose director openly aligns himself with a president who sees entire categories of Americans as enemies to be punished. By the time Dean tells him, "You're failing, not me," the contrast is unmistakable. Patel is performing. Dean is warning. And that's the part viewers need to sit with long after the hearing ends. The moment an institution becomes a weapon, everyone is a potential target. Even judges, even legislators, even voters. A functioning democracy isn't defined by how it treats its allies. It's defined by how it treats dissent. This clash wasn't about who could score a hit. It was about who still understands what institutions are supposed to protect. Dean leaves the room reminding viewers that independence is not a bureaucratic luxury. It is the backbone of a stable democracy. And the question that lingers over the hearing as the cameras cut out is simple, uncomfortable, and absolutely urgent. If the blueprint for revenge is already written, who's next on the list? What do you think? Was this accountability or a warning sign that the boundaries between government and politics are dissolving faster than anyone expected?